Hello, everyone. This is Christian Bassar with another episode of the Historical Thoughts and Interpretations podcast. Today, I will be having a conversation with CJ Leung. CJ hosts the Cool History Bros YouTube channel, on which he mostly discusses Chinese and East Asian history and culture. His channel very effectively introduces these rich topics in lighthearted and fun ways, along with many nice eye-catching animations. I certainly recommend checking out his channel, as it has helped me learn more about Asian history. CJ is currently working on summarizing the classical Chinese novel Water Margin. Today on the podcast, we will have a quite deep discussion regarding Confucianism, which is more correctly known, perhaps, as Ruism. We'll talk about Ruism's origins and beliefs, as well as how the philosophy influenced Chinese and other Asian societies. CJ will also help us correct some of the misconceptions surrounding Ruism, how ideas about it were poorly transmitted, and thus how the philosophy has been misunderstood in many circles. Let's get right into it. And I would like to apologize in advance. We had a few technical issues, nothing too drastic or anything. The interview went very well. But in the first little bit, there was a little bit of a timing issue, and also like my voice seems really slow sometimes. The way I recorded, it was like I heard myself as I was talking, so it made my words sound a little different, and it made me speak a little slower. And there is one time in about 45 minutes in or so that we lost a little bit of CJ's voice when he was talking about a figure in Chinese history. But aside from that, everything went well. I just wanted to make note of that and apologize for that beforehand. So, hello, CJ. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, how are you, Christian? Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for having
yeah,
me. It's an honor to be brought to your podcast. A very interesting one. Yeah, you got tons of different topics that don't usually cover, and it's very interesting. It's very eclectic.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I think there's a lag in the in the audio and recording.
All right, I see. Okay, I hope it's not gonna ruin too many things.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. I'll just give like a few seconds for it to transmit and everything. So, CJ, if you don't mind
Hmm.
giving some personal background about yourself and some info on your YouTube channel. I know I
Hmm.
really enjoy it myself. You really present Asian history in a fun and lighthearted way, and you can learn a lot watching the videos too.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I'm mostly a amateur historian.
Okay.
I used to work at video editing company,
Mm-hmm.
and we make educational videos for schools and so on. And I started branching out, making videos on my own for YouTube. Just creating all this sort of like information and news information on history, on mostly Asian history that's not usually covered, even though it's a well-known fact, and also mostly information that's been discussed in the higher part of education that rarely gets transmitted down to the lower side of education, middle or lower education, because what happened is that um, information and historical knowledge just keep evolving.
Right.
The problem is, it takes a really long time, or sometimes it never gets transmitted down to high schools or even primary schools. So a lot of history is still misconceived and so on. And my a lot of my information is hardly controversial at all, but a lot of people are still quite surprised by all this seemingly new information that I provide.
Mm.
And I just, figured it out when I'm speaking to my friends or just other people about this side of history that they don't know of, and just thought, hey, why don't I try and make a YouTube channel out of this? Just make
Yeah.
it interesting enough,
Uh,
make it palatable for younger viewer too, so that it's easy for them to understand.
yeah. Oh wow, that's really really cool. Yeah, because sometimes you can be in that. Well, they call it the ivory tower of academics, right? So
That's
it's
right.
you have this specialized knowledge of something, and then people in high school or middle school, like you said, they might not know anything. Like somebody in Canada may know a little bit about the Three Kingdoms period or the
Mm,
various periods in China, and especially
mm.
about communist China and stuff like that. But it's not deep. It's not really. If they don't look for it, they won't know it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is not the people in ivory towers' fault. The
Yeah.
thing is, sometimes they are judged by the sort of articles and the research they put out, and they don't have time to actually transmit it to normal, regular people.
Hmm.
And that's the problem. That's the way they are trained to write, and
Yeah.
that's how they are trained to communicate. So, I do have a lot of friends, in academia and so on.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
life isn't that great too, and hardly anybody look up that information.
Hmm.
Sometimes the problem is, with the educational curriculum itself, whether they want to pick up all this new information to be brought into lower education or
Yeah.
middle or lower education. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That makes perfect sense where it's depends on, and a lot of knowledge depends on access to archives, what
Hmm.
grade 8 student is going to look in archives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Journals and so on, and it's
Yeah.
also gated by all this subscription and all this like
Hmm.
money that they need to earn from all these journals, from these publications.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
a lot of gated knowledge that exists there.
Definitely. Yeah. I mentioned the magic of editing when you do podcasts and YouTube videos, but editing won't get you past the big firewall, or the big paywall.
Yeah, that's right.
Paywall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay, cool. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, you are currently summarizing a Chinese novel called Water Margin. How's that
That's right.
project going, and what is Water Margin?
Oh, it's ongoing. Water Margin, it's a story. It's a semi-fictional story
Okay.
based on the Song Dynasty. What happened is that, um, there was a rebellion by a figure called Song Jiang back during the Northern Song Dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, it seemed to be a rather small rebellion. Everything is solved, but this has become set as a backdrop uh, of a epic story of a group of 108 outlaws.
Mm-hmm.
That's a significant Buddhist number,
Oh.
and and they it's a story about the human interaction and pretty much about human drama,
Mm-hmm.
very manly human drama. That's how they write. That's what they consider to be manly sort of like character. And the thing is, they are not completely heroic. They are the story is very much more like a Sopranos than anything else.
Hmm.
They are very morally flawed,
Yeah.
and a lot of them are defined as much by their abilities and how good they are at fighting. Some of them, there's a very completely different eclectic group of people. Some of
Hmm.
them are actually just a painter who is roped in to create forgeries, and some of them are carvers uh, uh, pulled in to create like a forgery of like seal because they used stamp seals as
Oh,
signature
yes.
back then. Yeah, that sort of stuff. So
Oh.
it's a like a humongous heist novel,
Mm.
and they are pretty much creating a group of bandits and outlaws just to fight against the corrupt government officials.
Oh.
And
Wow.
yeah, yeah, that's a very very rebellious novel. It's you can kind of imagine it to be the cyberpunk of back then, but it's not quite cyber.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a
not
very
quite
punk
so
novel.
much. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
wow, that's amazing. And when was it written?
it was written around the early middle or early Ming Dynasty. What happens is that um, usually with all these novels, they started out as local stories.
Yeah.
There are lots of like storytellers and so on. It's an art form back then. Vernacular storytellers.
Yeah.
They go around telling stories. That's why these stories can be very long. There's a lot of different characters that has been collated into one big novel, and somebody. The story would have started somewhere around the Song Dynasty,
Hmm.
as some of these events are fictionalized by roadside storytellers until they became collected into a large novel. And even as a large novel, there are a few iterations, because back then there weren't any copyright laws. People just
Yeah.
add their own flair, and they just got improved and improved. It's like a sort of like a crowdsourced storytelling. The
Hmm.
story keeps improving time through time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's really cool. Everything gets added to. Everybody adds their own flair to the legend and the myth and everything.
Hmm.
Okay.
That's
Oh,
right.
very cool. So, our topic for today is
Mhm.
Confucianism. And
Right.
very broadly, what is Confucianism? When did it start? And who founded it?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? I think we should start with the idea that there is different interpretation from different traditions,
Yeah.
because from China and so on, everyone would agree that it is a philosophy
Hmm.
started by Confucius. But the thing is, this is a there is also the idea that this is the tradition in Chinese historiography.
Hmm.
It is considered as a tradition that went beyond Confucius. But in the West, what happened is that they use an old Jesuit lens to look at
Yeah.
this uh, Confucius idea, because what happened is that the story was brought to the West through the Jesuits, so it was seen through a very uh, Christian lens,
Hmm.
um, or more like, to be more precise, Catholic lens.
Yeah.
The Jesuits who transmitted these stories actually have their own agendas too. I will go into that a bit later, which is
Yeah.
very interesting.
Hmm.
And the readers of these transmitted stories, a lot of them have their own agendas too.
Yeah.
For example, back then, Voltaire, he was, as we know, he was very much against the church and everything, and he needed a model of a working government, the
Mm.
Chinese Confucius philosophical model, where moral can be decided without a religion, without a church. So
Yeah.
he just champions Confucianism and everything as a great model of a secular government.
Hmm.
So everyone is interpreting it a bit differently to pretty much fulfill their own agenda.
Hmm.
And but the thing is, ideas do get lost in translation, or you can say localized to fit the local needs.
Yeah.
Is You can just imagine it's sort of like a Chinese food in America. There are like different dishes that is never seen in China,
Yep.
and so is Japan. Ramen became a Japanese dish, even
Hmm.
though it's it was purportedly supposed to be a Chinese dish, but we actually in China they don't actually have that dish. It was a modified Chinese dish that became a ramen, and
Mm.
yeah, it became Japanese dish now.
Yeah.
Even though it is sold at so-called Chinese restaurants in Japan, which is not quite Chinese.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, in Korea, the same thing. You have Korean Chinese
Yeah,
restaurants, so they
jajang.
have
Yeah,
jjajangmyeon, not
that's right.
jjajangmyeon, I believe the
Yeah,
Chinese is. So it's
that's right.
yeah. Well, it's interesting when you talk about different lenses, different agendas, like the primary Russian chronicle, which is kind of the most precious early Russian historical document of made in the 1200s, I believe, but the narrative there is before the what is now Russia and Ukraine converted to Orthodox Christianity, they were pagans, they were evil people. They would do all this stuff, and the ruler was a particularly evil man, and then he converts to Christianity, and then he's a paragon of virtue. So
Yeah.
it's kind of this similar thing with using agendas and lenses.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and the what happened to Confucianism in Korea is also quite interesting too.
Yeah.
I can get into that later. But
Mm.
do you have any specific question, or where do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I was just wondering, what's the traditional narrative origin of Confucian ethics?
Well, the origin of Confucian ethics started way before Confucius.
Mm.
The way uh, maybe we can use another term, Ruism,
Yeah.
as in China, it is called Ru.
Hmm.
A Ru tradition. It's what the tradition is called. Confucius is the most important sage,
Right.
the one who collated all this information. But
Hmm.
as he said himself, he is a transmitter, not an innovator,
Ah.
because he is using the authority of the previous kings. Um, some of them are the legendary kings, of
Hmm.
course, that we consider to be mythical. We don't have any historical record of them.
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes from the Zhou kings, the Zhou royalty,
Hmm.
because at his time, it was a time of civil war. The various federations that form the Zhou dynasty, all the surrounding states are starting to rebel against the rule and the control of Zhou. But the Zhou dynasty itself, the size of their holding is becoming smaller and smaller,
Mm.
and all they had was sort of like a moral and cultural and civilizational soft power that they still had.
Right.
Eventually, they are going to be destroyed, eliminated by the warring states period.
Hmm.
And then it became considered a warring state because all these other states call themselves king now. They are challenging the authority of the Zhou dynasty king.
Yeah.
Um, Confucius, he lived slightly before the warring states period, but the thing is, he is pretty much anticipating what's going to happen next.
Mm.
So uh, and that's why it eventually became imperial China when one of the states, the Qing, conquered all the other states and became the unifier of China.
Yeah.
What happened? What happened back then even during Zhou dynasty, all these different states, they are lands, fiefs, that are given to the relatives of the Zhou kings, Zhou royalty.
Hmm.
Eventually, they uh, develop their own cultures and so on. But before that is still the unifying factor of the Zhou sort of rituals and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
For example, during Confucius' time, or slightly after him, they were relying on the five classics.
Yeah.
There are the Confucian canon of 4 books and 5 classics.
Hmm.
They started out with uh, 5 classics. It's
Hmm.
actually 6, but they lost the 6th classic.
Oh no.
Uh, yeah. And it's only during the time of Song Ming Ruism, or in the West, it's called Neo-Confucianism. They
Ah.
added the 4 books.
Hmm.
It's added by Zhu Xi. He's going to be quite a central character when we get into Neo-Confucianism.
Yeah.
All these examples, he's referring to all these sage kings from legends that people back then considered to have existed for real. It's very much like religion, or very much like, for example, in the Bible, they believing in Noah and all the other characters that we don't have exact archaeological evidence of their existence. But the
Mm.
thing is, they believe that these characters exist, and they are using this narrative, their sagely narrative, as example on how they should live their life.
Mm. Hmm.
Usually, in the West, the Chinese history is framed in the form of dynasties.
Right.
The Xia dynasty, which is known to be mythical, and then Shang, which is semi-mythical because we only have archaeological evidence of the later half of the Shang dynasties.
Okay.
And then Zhou is quite it's quite relatively solid. We have quite a few archaeological evidence of that, except that, of course, there are competing accounts from history. So we are not quite sure which ones are right. It's always like that. Yeah. And the thing is, before before Xia dynasty, the mystical dynasty, there were the mystical rulers of China, the 3 Augusts and 5 emperors. These are quite mythical. Yellow Emperor Huangdi is one of the. Okay, I think we should start with the 3 Augusts.
Sure.
3 Augusts, they are the Fuxi, Nuwa, and Senong. These are cultural heroes. They pretty much invented, created the world, and so on. They are gods or demigods.
Right.
And by the time we reach the 5 emperors, they are sagely kings. They are, people who are perfect in their virtues. And there was the Yellow Emperor and the 2 others, and very important to Confucius, he focused on the last 2, Yao and Sun.
Okay.
Their best virtue is that they observe meritocracy. Yao, he gave his throne to Sun because he tested Sun. He considered him to be a man of great virtue, and he just gave his throne away to the best person. So let the best person rule. It's a form of meritocracy.
Right.
And this, I guess, this also becomes one of the core ideas that led to the imperial examination. Let the best person rule. Let the person control.
The exam system.
That's right, yeah. But that will happen much later. The thing is, even Confucius himself may have his own agenda in this, because he may be interpreting it in the way that he preferred, because there are competing accounts, the bamboo annals, that has been uncovered very early, actually, in around 300 AD. Wow. They were really, because the Chinese back then, they are really into records. Yeah. They really like writing history because it also, history writing reinforces their sovereignty, their legitimacy to rule. So that's history writing is quite important. There is a competing account saying that Sun actually imprisoned Yao, so it's a coup. And after a while, he lets Yao's son control rule, and until eventually he takes over. So it is still realpolitik.
Yeah,
that's a competing account. But of course, that competing account may not be true either, because we don't have exact archaeological evidence of any of those.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just for context, the Warring States period is in BC, right?
That's right. Yep.
Oh, okay. Like 4th century, 3rd century.
Around 5th, or it's a bit earlier, I think.
Oh, okay. So like 5th century. Yeah. So Confucius, the guy who was relaying, not the innovator. So he was around the 500s or 400s BC, something
That's
like
right.
that. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
around 500 BC. So Warring States is around 400 BC something. Until it's ended by 221 BC when Qing dynasty just conquered the rest of China.
Right. Oh, okay. Okay, thanks very much for that context there. Perfect. So does Confucianism or Ruism have like an eschatology? Like different philosophies and religions have different eschatologies or endpoints. Like communism has the perfect workers' paradise. Christianity has the kingdom of heaven. Neoliberalism has democracy and the rules-based order. And so does Confucianism have something like that, like a perfect society where everybody follows the law, everybody respects elders, and so on?
Yeah, something like that.
Mm,
As you said, it's really he's really like harkening back to the let's the utopian past, the time
right.
of Yao and Sun. So as long as everyone is doing their role, and the world would be pretty much at peace. And if you people rule by meritocracy and behave according to the rites and rituals and treat others benevolently and so
Mhm.
on, he's pretty much trying to create uh, this sort of idyllic past that you would imagine people who would be caught in the civil war would be wishing for,
Right.
because during his time there was a lot of chaos already.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm,
So it's an eschatology of looking forward, but looking back to a utopian past.
that's right. Yeah.
Oh. You talked about Confucianism being called Ruism.
Mm,
What
mm.
is perhaps the biggest misconception or misunderstanding of Ruism, especially in the Western world? Maybe aside from naming, are there other misconceptions about it?
I would say that it is a contested sort of like definition of Ruism or Confucianism as a religion.
Yeah.
Because if you would ask a lot of like perhaps like Chinese people or people who live mostly in Asia, they would not consider Confucianism or Ruism to be a religion,
Right.
because it's a sort of like, to them it's a philosophy that can fit into many aspects of other religions. You can be a Confucian Buddhist, Confucian Taoist, and everything, even though the Confucians hate both of them. They, yeah, that's right. But the thing is, uh, yeah, but in the West, the idea is that they also practice ancestor worship.
Right.
But the thing is, the ancestor worship is it can be fit into anything. It's just part of their tradition.
Hmm.
Since Taoists also practice ancestor worship, Buddhists ancestor worship, to them, it has receded into the background. This ancestor worship doesn't count as religion to them anymore. So
Yeah.
that's why even during the time of the Jesuits, they just let the Jesuits come in. All right, we'll be Christians and we will still doing our ancestor worship thing because that's just what everybody does. They don't
Yeah.
consider, yeah, they don't consider that to be something against the Christian teaching.
Right.
And back then, what happened is that the Jesuits at the time, they also allowed them. Will become a controversy later on,
Hmm.
the Chinese right controversy. But at the first time, they just let them do it, and they are gaining quite a lot of followers, and it's working pretty fine for them until the Pope banned it later, and
Uh,
that's when it created discord between uh, the Chinese Qing dynasty and the foreign missionaries.
right. Right.
That's when the separation starts.
Okay. And I guess maybe nowadays, perhaps I'm not sure. If
Mhm.
someone is looking to be like follow the Confucian philosophy, not as a religion, again, but could maybe leave out the ancestor worship or respect, and still be
Mhm.
a Christian in Korea, for example, or a Buddhist in
Mhm.
China? Is it kind of like malleable like that? Like you can, I'll follow the Confucian philosophy, but I won't worship my
Mhm.
ancestors. Does that happen?
Oh yeah, sure, that
Yeah.
happens.
Okay.
The thing is, Confucianism, it doesn't have a church really.
Yeah.
It's what happens. Confucianism is spread in schools. The idea is that back then you have Confucian education,
Hmm.
and because education starts with learning Confucian texts and also other various texts. They
Yeah.
have practically monopoly on education itself.
Hmm.
So they don't have church. They just have school.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a high-ranked scholar, if you want to pass the examinations, you have to take the tests,
Yeah.
take the which use lots of like Confucian topics and subjects as test subjects, and you would have to be well versed in that. And also, even officials, even kings, are sometimes bound by Confucian rules.
Yeah.
Even when for example, emperors. This is very interesting with Emperor Taizong. He was the war emperor, the young, very virile and powerful warrior emperor. When he launched a coup, took over the throne from his father, he had to keep his father alive and happy, because if he did anything bad to his father, he would have committed a grave Confucian sin.
Yeah.
Nobody would accept him as a ruler. And the same thing goes for officials. Sometimes, if they have domestic issues, if they treated their parents badly, the emperor would just have them come in and question them why because the idea is that you would start your rule from home. You would treat your family, your friends, brothers, and your father and everything in the proper order, so that you can also rule the government with the same virtue as you have in your domestic life.
Right.
This is what the 5 relations in Confucianism, like friends to friends, friends to siblings, a friend to parents, friends, one to ruler, and so on.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very hierarchical system, I understand. You respect your elders, respect your rulers, respect the state. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
right.
Oh, very
And
good.
it also made a bit of a contentious issue, because it's become a question: should you respect your father more or the law more? It's become because the thing is, when Confucius was asked, is it virtuous for someone to hand his father into the law if he committed a crime, or is it more virtuous to cover his father, to protect his father?
Yeah.
Confucius says he can see virtue in the son protecting the father.
Yeah.
So every bit of like text is debatable.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's interesting. So I guess that's the biggest misconception. I know it growing up in the Western world, it was like I always saw Confucianism as a religion. I'm not sure if I was taught or had the impression that Confucius was worshipped like Jesus is in Christianity, but I'm not sure if I was remembering that. But I guess it's a philosophy, not a religion per se.
I would say it's a philosophy with a lot of rituals
Yeah.
that may have religious origins. Yeah,
Yeah.
because as Confucius says, he can appreciate the ritual.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not necessarily for the god itself. He's not doing it for the god, because the ritual it helps builds a character. It just builds a virtuous moral person.
Yeah. These are kind of like spiritual habits almost, if you will.
That's right, something like
Yeah.
that.
So you mentioned the missionaries and the Jesuits. What about their relationship and their contact with Ruism?
Oh yeah, and this is a very interesting story. It has to do with Matteo Ricci. He's a very important or a very famous missionary in China itself, because he did a lot of things, and he was considered to be quite an important historical person. And also, this is how the label Neo-Confucianism was thrown onto the Songming Ruists. That's because of his perception of them, which is quite interesting. So the thing is, with a lot of the missionaries, this is not exclusive to Christian missionaries, of course. Buddhist missionaries too also do this. When they go to a new place, they usually they would adopt their gods or their concepts into the local ideas.
Very
For
common.
example, Yeah, very common. And sometimes people get confused, whether they are talking about one of their old gods, or is this an old local concept or something. But the thing is, when the Jesuit missionaries came to China, at first they thought, because Buddhism seems to be more religious, and they have came into contact with Buddhism previously. So they dressed themselves up as Buddhist monks at first,
Oh, wow.
trying to get, trying to get Christian converts, and then perhaps they'll just inform them, "Surprise, you're a Christian." um,
Wow, that's weird.
yeah. Well, the thing is, uh, it didn't work that well. They
Yeah.
realized that uh, Buddhism, they may get a few people in. The thing is, but the ones who are holding the real power in China at the time, they are the Ruists, the scholar officials. And what they did is they rebranded themselves. After a while, realizing that um, uh, just dressing up as Buddhists don't work, so they started dressing up as Confucianists, and they started reading all this Confucian texts,
Yeah.
and they did a really good job at it too. So what happened is that they are become very convincing. They have very deep knowledge on Confucian texts and so on, and uh, Theology himself, he was informed of there is a term for there are some Chinese gods that has not been worshipped since the after around Qing or Han dynasty,
Oh.
not from state of Qi. He was called a Tianzu, or Heaven's Lord. So
Okay.
he started using that name for the Christian God, Tianzu. But that's why right now, what's it called? Catholicism in
Yeah.
China is a Tianzu religion.
Ah, okay.
The name stuck, but besides that, he also argued that the god of the Shang dynasty, Shang Di, he is also supposed to be the monotheistic god, so they are worshiping the same god.
Oh, okay.
And become very well versed in Confucian text, Confucian literature, and he was invited to see other like scholar officials and so on. And he also debated against the other Confucianists. Because at the time, the orthodoxy has turned to Zhu Xi's school of rational Confucianism,
Rational.
and
Okay.
also Wang Yangming's Confucianism. It's he became one of the contenders against them. So he argued that there was the original Ruism that is lost in the current form of Confucianism. That is being pushed by Zhu Xi's disciples and also Wang Yangming's disciples.
Okay.
So he says, we need to go back to the original Confucianism, and to start respecting the one God and so on.
Yeah.
So he's using a lot of like Confucianism to justify his religion. He's arguing that it is his religion fits with Confucianism, and he managed to gain quite a handful of what's it called,
Converts
influential
or
supporters.
influential support.
Yeah, influential supporters. Also a convert, Xu Guangqi. He is a Confucian scholar who is one of the higher profile convert into Christianity.
Okay.
He said that Christianity is compatible with Confucianism, and says that all this current form of Confucianism that's pushed by Zhu Xi has been influenced by Taoism and Buddhism and so on.
Right.
So they are not really that good either. Uh, however, that what he was doing is actually quite the mainstream. He's not the only one who is pushing against the orthodoxy. So there are quite a few other schools, quite a few orthodoxy pushing against each other, trying to find influence. So he's practically thrown himself into the fray, and he did really well defending his idea with other Confucians.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he has created a bit of like a niche for himself.
Okay.
And by the Ming Dynasty, he was very well accepted. He was even invited to court, drew the map of the world, and he, since he has lots of other useful skills,
Mm-hmm.
he pretty much created a base for missionaries.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Chinese converts still worship their ancestors. They offer incense to their ancestor and so on. There are still a lot of the other traditional Chinese trapping.
Yeah.
This will blow up later, 100 or so years after, when the Chinese right controversy happened.
Right.
So throughout the Ming Dynasty, the Christians had a pretty good run,
Mm-hmm.
and then during the Qing Dynasty, they also had a good run. So the Kangxi Emperor gave them a special law telling the populace that these people are practicing their peaceful religion, do not harm them, and so on. And he gave them like special protection along with a few other groups of missionaries. But the thing is, later on, the Pope of the time, around the late 600s or early late 1600s or early 1700s,
Okay.
the Pope considered the Chinese rituals to be pagan. He thinks that it should not have a place in worship, in the church worship, and also he decided that the name for God needs to be 天主, so you can't use Sangdi or anything else. So he prescribed a lot of changes that the Christians in China needs to follow.
Right. Okay.
And when the emperor saw this decree from the Pope, he was really angered by it.
Yeah.
And he kicked out all the missionaries and says if they want to come and preach, they have to follow the traditions of Matteo Ricci. So for a while, Christianity and the missionaries had issue entering China. It's because of this Chinese right controversy.
Wow.
But nowadays, as far as I know, it's allowed for Chinese people to offer incense to their ancestors now. I think they have relaxed the ban for now.
Oh, really? Oh, like the Catholic Church allows it.
That's right. Yeah. And going back to Neo-Confucianism, this is the interesting bit, because Zhu Si himself, he was in the fray arguing against the Orthodox Matteo Ricci. He was arguing against the Orthodox Zhu Si sort of like a brand of Neo-Confucianism.
Okay.
He called these people the new Confucianist, Neo-Confucianist.
Yeah.
That's the label came from Matteo Ricci. He didn't invent the label, but he created this idea that these people are doing something new. They are something separate from the Christian tradition. So that's why we have the Neo-Confucian label in the West, because in the West, they were thought to have done something new when it's really just part of their ongoing like Confucian tradition, where there is constant arguing and constant evolution of idea.
Yeah, and that's the one that just happened to be called Neo, not any of the other variations.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and this is how ideas are formed, because they are seen from a different perspective, and there are different sort of like agendas behind it too.
Yes.
Because Matteo Ricci, to his credit, he did everything in the realm of the Chinese Confucian debate, but he still has his own Christian idea to push. So he considered them to be something separate.
Yes.
But this idea is further, you can say, twisted or further spun to the benefit of other like contemporary readers of the Confucian text that's brought into the Jesuits.
Right.
So they can, because the Jesuits, when Matteo Ricci wrote his book, it was written in Italian.
Yes.
And even from Italian, when it was translated to Latin, the lingua franca back then, there are some passages that was deleted. For example, on how people go to the Confucian temples and burn incense. Some of the parts are deleted, so that the Confucian practice seems even more secular.
Wow. So it's almost like it almost seems like the either by him or the translators of his book into Latin, it seems like they wanted to give the Catholic world a perception that Confucianism and Christianity are sort of compatible, so we're just turning these Confucian people into Christians, and they keep a little bit of their practice and it's okay, until the time the Pope realized it's like, this looks like idol worship or ancestor worship to me, so then the gig is up. I guess that's what it seems like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Because before that, they did a really good job. They gained quite a few converts until the Pope stopped it.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Then it's all the old debate. It's like, let's open the doors of the church. Let's get everybody in. But somebody else will say, well, let's teach them accurately. Don't just get them in. Teach them correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's how also how Voltaire and so on, they started like championing Confucianism as an alternative or as a model for a secular government. Back then, he was quite popular.
Yeah.
It was especially secularized back then through because they have their own agendas to push.
Yeah. And because the Enlightenment philosophers were also talking about, not all of them rejected religion per se, but they didn't want religion and state together, and also they had that idea, we don't want the church to dictate morality, so that perception of a secular Confucianism fits in perfectly with their worldview. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Very
and
interesting.
This sort of issue, all this information getting a bit warped just goes all around. It's not just not necessarily just from Asia to the West, but it can be from the West to Asia and so on. But even today, it is still happening. For example, I had a previous the female pirate queen of Asia and so on.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if you know about her, but
I
she's
think I've heard of her.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she's pretty much a figure that is mythologicalized in the West. In China, they don't really know her. She's actually a minor character in the legend of Zhang Baozai. Zhang Baozai was a local folk hero, local pirate that fought against government boats and everything, sort of like a local legendary bandit.
Yeah.
There are various stories or poems about him, but Qingsi was his well, she is sort of like a background manager, the heads, the brain running the ground. But Zhang Baozai is the person who is sung in poems and everything. The thing is, maybe she is really the master strategist or whatever. But the fact is, there are no written record or information. There are not enough of them to turn her into an action kung fu hero or anything like that.
Wow.
All this story is pushed and written by what's that called? By a writer who was just writing a story for a one of those pulp novels, one of those pulp books.
Oh yeah.
And he said that he heard about this story from his local Chinese laundry person.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. So then it just becomes blown out of proportion in a way, and so she gets a much larger press, if you will, than in the place where she was from.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
a lot of
interesting.
the stuff were added, like for example, her punching her husband, and soon enough, after her husband's death, she took over control. There are lots of details that are embellished,
Yeah.
and even in the 1980s, even in the 1980s, because this story started to circulate in the West since the early 20th century. So even in the
Okay.
1980s, a lot of the story is taken to be mostly true
Mm-hmm.
until the early 2000s by the
Oh.
same author, Professor Diane Murray.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in 20 years since she wrote uh, this this article about her, she came back to the topic and realized that a lot of these stories are not quite true.
They're not quite. I have to
Yeah,
revise my uh, my earlier findings.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even this sort of information can take 20 years to revise,
Yeah.
and I don't even know if people would be right, would be correcting the story that has gone to media, or all these embellished stories and so on.
Yeah.
There is no incentive in correcting misinformation.
Yeah. Never. Yeah. Never let facts interfere with a good story.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. So applying that to Confucianism or Ruism, I understand when we were talking earlier by email, you mentioned that even like in Asia, they're starting to use, or in academia rather, they're starting to use the term Ruism instead of Confucianism, right? But that might take a very long time to fully correct because when I'm growing up, I hear Confucianism, or even like the silly quotes or jokes about if somebody says something from China, it says like Confucius say, and then another thing. It becomes a meme before they became cool on the internet, right? So there's a lot of
Yeah.
misperceptions, or like you said, sort of a mistransferring or mistranslating of philosophies or ideas.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And well, I guess uh, I don't think it is especially necessary to use the proper name or whatever. But the thing, because language do have differences.
That's true.
I think as long as they just understand that uh, things as they are,
Hmm.
I think that's be good enough.
Yeah.
Because I think we pretty much have the same issue with the name of countries. I did a previous episode on the uh, endonym and exonym of countries, and it
Okay.
does say a lot about how the first impression is always stuck in various countries.
Hmm.
For example, the name China itself, it came from India,
Hmm.
uh, because in China they call China 中国, of course, the middle, translated literally as Middle Kingdom or Middle Country,
Yes.
more literal.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's become China because it was called Qin in India,
Hmm.
because it is assumed that back then the westernmost state of the Zhou dynasty was
Hmm.
the state of Qin,
Yeah.
which will eventually conquer the rest of China and unified as the Qing dynasty.
Yeah.
So the name Qin was brought to Persia and so on,
Hmm.
and China also had another name,
Yeah.
Kate.
Oh,
Kate
okay.
came from Khitan. Yeah,
Yes.
it was during slightly before the Song dynasty. The Khitan people, they ruled northern part of China, and they think, hey, they are going to follow the Confucian tradition and claim that they are China.
Hmm.
So the idea is that they want to use this Confucian tradition and all this sort of uh, bells and whistles, so that they can justify their rule over China.
Yeah.
So what happened was that the Khitans also had familial connection with the one of the royal family of the later Tang Dynasty, because they uh, at the end of Tang Dynasty there was a chaotic period
Mm-hmm.
of let's see, the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period, where there are 5 successive dynasties. They are just fighting over the control of China.
Ah.
It was Liang dynasty, and then later Liang dynasty, later Tang, because a lot of these dynasties, succeeding dynasties, they are using name from previous dynasties to justify their rule. So what
Mm-hmm.
happens is that the Khitans help the people from the later Tang dynasty take over the later Liang dynasty. So since they have supported them and they also have familial connection with their with the father of the ruler and everything, they consider themselves as family.
Yeah.
So they wanted the people to start calling them as the elder brother emperor. And
Okay.
eventually they want to be the Chinese emperor themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because they are creating justifications. Starting, you can kind of imagine that there's a long-term case of war to conquer China, pretty much.
Right.
So they consider themselves the real China
Mm-hmm.
after a while,
Mm-hmm.
and that is when the Mongols started to appear.
Yeah.
There were still small tribes back then, and so so they considered China to be Khitan.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's where the name come from. Khitai came from Khitan, and that name was brought to the West
Mm-hmm.
by Marco Polo,
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
because
that's true. Mm-hmm. Because
yeah,
he
that's right,
went
because he
there during the Mongol period in China, didn't he?
that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So he used the Mongol name for China, Khitai.
Oh, wow. That's amazing because in the Russian language, like I speak and I study Russian,
Mm.
it's called Kitai in Russian. So it's like we call it China, but they don't take a transliteration of China, but they call it
Mm.
Kitai. So that's wow. So that's the origin of Kitai.
That's right, yeah.
Wow.
So the name of countries and just like ideas,
Hmm.
the first impression matters a lot. So
Yes.
a lot of what the West know about Confucianism is still heavily framed by the Jesuits' ideas
Yeah.
and the
Hmm.
early thinkers uh, who read into all these accounts of Confucius
Yeah.
by the Jesuits.
Well, and of course, it seems to be there was a need to put it around a central figure, perhaps, because, well, in the old days, even up to maybe even the early 20th century, I'm not sure, this is just an example, that,
Mhm.
you would hear about, instead of the word Muslims, you will hear the word Mohammedans. So it's, kind of naming the religion after the prophet or the founder of that philosophy. So instead of Ruism, which is the thought of the well, what does Ruism mean? Like Ru, is that mean the way or the path or something?
Ru really means a scholar.
Scholar. Oh, okay, yeah. So,
That's right.
yeah. So I guess the Jesuits want to put a name to the philosophy, so they go to the person Confucius,
Yeah.
and so he's the quote unquote founder of it. But even as he would say, I'm not an innovator. I'm not originating this idea. I'm just talking about these ideas that are here and thinking more of them. So it's a different conception of the philosophy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, that's what makes it really interesting. I guess with all this knowledge that's being written up, but in ivory towers, various academies, I think
Hmm.
it would be a good idea. After a while, people to come around and compare notes, start comparing notes, because
Yeah.
I don't think there is enough like interchange
Mm.
between what is being taught about the same subject in one country and another.
Yes, yes. That's why cultural exchange and humanitarian visas, which deal with cultural exchange and stuff like that, it's an important thing. Not only do you get Not only does it make academia and learning more interesting, it also makes it like being able to understand something else properly instead of having where you might have a good understanding of something, but there's a crucial misconception.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Going now into practicalities, we talked a bit about Confucian beliefs, some of the practices, and the origins.
Mhm.
What about it practically? How has Ruism influenced Asian societies? Has it had more influence in one region over another?
Yes, it influenced different regions differently because when they were brought into Korea, they were brought into Japan. They were tailored to the local political needs and local
Right.
agendas, pretty much.
Hmm.
And the thing is, even in China itself,
Yeah.
it's a living tradition because
Hmm.
new ideas just keeps getting added. New Confucian traditions, new interpretations, new schools
Hmm.
are popping in and out
Oh wow.
all the time. That's why when Zhu Xi and his school of Zhengyi, school of Confucianism, came around, they became very relevant, and Zhu Xi pretty much become the figurehead of what the West would call Neo-Confucianism. The thing is, even not long after Confucius' death, we have Mencius. He pretty much added other ideas, and but at the time there were already competitions against him.
Hmm.
Xunzi, Confucius, Mencius, he claims that all humans are by nature good, but
Hmm.
Xunzi says all humans are by nature evil or so selfish pretty much,
Yeah, yeah.
so that's why they need to be educated, but
Mm.
Mencius, he thinks they they are by nature good, but sometimes they just need to be refined until they can reach that perfected stage.
Yeah.
Mencius is a bit more influential, and his line of tradition is brought forward. The thing is, Confucianism, we need to know that there are different strains. Like most ideas, most philosophies, the Confucian scholars are the people in the ivory tower. They
Mm.
are debating how Confucianism should work and how it should be, how the classical text should be reinterpreted, and
Okay.
so on. The normal people, the peasants, they are pretty much just uh, taking it by osmosis because a lot of these traditions already exist in that tradition already,
Mm-hmm.
and like ancestor worship on all the other things.
Right.
The Confucius's version is just more ritualized and more rigid. And in because back we need to remember that China is an empire, which means that there are different provinces, different states
Yes.
with their own localized traditions and so on,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone just do things a bit differently.
Right.
So this sort of Confucian orthodoxy is pretty much pushed by the scholars, by the Ruists, the
Mm-hmm.
Confucian scholars.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, uh, not all their not all of their ideas may be transmitted to the people. Sometimes they just stay in the book and so on.
Ah. Yeah. So then it becomes a textual idea that's not really doesn't really change or it's not really transmitted unless you read the books.
That's right.
Oh,
And
okay.
the thing is, a lot of people, if they want to uh, pass the imperial examination and to
Mm-hmm.
become successful, to gain official position,
Yeah.
they have to read the book if
Yeah,
they want to
yeah.
advance their own class.
Yeah. What would you say is the most significant change, perhaps, or is that too broad? Because there's may have been so many changes over the centuries.
A significant change between, I assume you're asking this in regards to Neo-Confucianism.
Mm.
Is that
Oh,
right? Or
like for like from the quote unquote original teachings to how it may have changed over the centuries. Like, have you thought of or is Neo Confucianism the biggest change?
uh, Neo-Confucianism is it's a change observed in the West.
Mm.
But in China, it's Songming Ruism.
Okay.
Songming lash. Uh, it means a Confucianism of Song dynasty and Ming dynasty. That's where there is a lot of change during that time. So they
Okay.
are seeing a period of change instead of a new Confucianism, or instead of a sudden change.
Okay.
So the change is observed more gradually over there because they are more familiar with the text, with the ideological evolution.
Oh, okay.
And the thing is, they actually had imperial academies, the hunting academies,
Mm-hmm.
which is used to decide what is the proper interpretation of these classical texts. And these academies, there are various factions vying for their own interpretation to be pushed to the emperor and so on. And one of the biggest success was Zhu Xi's interpretation, which is called Neo-Confucianism in the West.
Right.
He died before any of his ideas were implemented. It was pushed by his disciples, actually. So it's a tradition, or it's pretty much a tradition that's been carried over to his disciples, and they pushed his ideas through. And the thing is, it's a bit of a problem too, because what happened is that he picked the 4 books which he considered to be the essential part of Confucianism, and 2 of the books are actually just a small just an excerpt, a chapter from the classic Book of Rites. And there is also the Analects,
Yes.
and which is Confucius' saying. That's a separate book, and Mencius's books. So he thinks, these books are really important. You should know them really well before looking at the 5 classics. 5 classics, the base. And the problem is, these 4 books become the basic of all the Confucian testing. So if you want to pass the exam, you have to learn all the words in them exactly.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
verbatim.
Verbatim, yeah.
Wow. That's strict. Well, actually, going into that, Neo-Confucianism or Song Min, right? Song Min Ruinism?
Song Ming, yep,
Song Min.
Ruism, yeah.
Okay. So, I spent a few years in South Korea, and I found that the last dynasty there, the Chosun, followed Neo-Confucianism. So we talked a little bit about the roots of it. How was it applied in Korea? I understand it was, like you said, he wanted people to follow the text verbatim. So I understand in Korea it was a fairly intolerant and very strict philosophy. Is that what you found in your reading of it?
It has become that. The thing is, just to correct a bit, it's he didn't want people to remember them verbatim.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just that the way it has been implemented, because a lot of these ideas, even the later Neo-Confucianism, the later Neo-Confucianist Wang Yangming, he didn't want people to record his sayings, because he doesn't want people to because by that time, by the Ming Dynasty, it has already become a problem. He just wanted people to understand, to seek the answer himself, to seek the answer themselves. But what happened is that people keep writing down what he's saying, and
Yeah. Yep.
that has become an ongoing issue.
Right. Okay.
And what happens is that um, going back to Zhu Xi's time, he was very much against the Buddhists. He didn't
Yeah.
like the Buddhists because their way of life is very much against Confucianism. They cut themselves out of the family. They become ascetic, and sometimes they had to cut their own hair, which is as almost it's become something quite immoral in Confucianism, because it's parts of your body are considered to be gifts from your parents. You should not mutilate it at all.
Yeah.
And they cut their hair. Not only that, back then they also performed various rituals, like even hurting themselves and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's they are very much against Buddhism. But however, Buddhist and Taoist ideas have become so mainstream too. Their philosophy is so mainstream.
Yeah.
He also borrowed their cosmology,
Mm-hmm.
for example, from Hawaiian Buddhism, which
Oh,
is
okay.
a very interesting concept, which is called the Indra's net. The idea is that just imagine a net. When the lines cross, there should be a knot, right? But
Right.
imagine if those knots are made of jewels, very
Mm.
reflective jewels.
Huh.
From that jewels, yeah, from that jewel, you can see a reflection of the other jewels from the other parts of the net.
Yeah.
So the idea is that by looking into the microcosm, you can learn about the macrocosm too.
Wow.
So that's why during his time, his Confucianism is called rationalist Confucianism. So he encouraged Zhu encourages people to learn things by investigating things one by one, to learn through investigation.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the things that needs to be investigated is the classics. What are the important bits of the classics, and also other parts of life too, morally, and perhaps sometimes even things scientifically, but it's not quite science yet. But the idea is that you need to think of things rationally, almost as evidence-based investigation into moral too.
Okay.
What happened is that it's very influential.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a very strong case against Buddhism,
Yeah.
even though it borrows Buddhist ideas. And the Koreans love it so much. An Hyang, he looked when one of the Korean Confucian scholars,
Mm-hmm.
when he saw that, he just copied the material, draw a picture of Jusi and brought it to Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because back then, Buddhism had become a very corrupting influence in Korea.
Yes.
So he needs a competition against Buddhism.
Yeah.
And that's why Neo-Confucianism became championed to push against all this Buddhist influence.
Right.
But the problem is, as they replaced Buddhism, it also pretty much replaces all the fundamental needs. It has to cover all the grounds that Buddhism covered. For example, even not just ritual, it's also like spiritual and everything. So it needs to do everything Buddhism did and does it better.
It has to
Right.
replace what it tries to destroy within Korea.
That's right. So that's why something very funny between Korea and China happened during the Imjin War.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the around 1500s. When
Yes.
Japan attacked Korea.
Mm-hmm.
What happened is that when the Chinese soldiers came back, it's already the Joseon dynasty. A few hundred years have passed, since Neo-Confucianism has started to be
Yeah.
adopted in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
They become quite fundamentalists.
Yeah.
And when they saw the Chinese soldiers fighting along them, they say, "Oh my God, these people, they're supposed to be Confucianists, but they are so superstitious. They are a lot of them
Wow.
are Taoist believers. All of them are like Buddhist believers. What's
Wow.
wrong with them?" They are surprised. It's a
The-
culture shock.
well, it's that was actually another question or comment I had in my mind as well, because the idea of Neo-Confucianism in Korea being used against Buddhists and persecuting them, I guess the Buddhists, like you said, they had the establishment of Buddhism was kind of seen as corrupt and all powerful. So Neo-Confucianism and the
Mhm.
Joseon dynasty are trying to persecute them. But so this is very much a departure from China's three teachings ideology, which allowed Ruism, Taoism, and Buddhism to coexist, right?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very different. In China, they are very relaxed. With what they do.
yeah.
I guess it's sort of like how this ideology is also Confucianism is also practiced quite differently in Japan too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. How is it different in Japan?
Right. Japan, like Korea, had a really long contact with each other,
Right.
with China. So the idea is Confucianism isn't new, but Neo-Confucianism came much later. So previously, during the Tang Dynasty, when the Japanese are sending their envoys and so on, most of their envoys are actually Buddhists. So everything is brought back through Buddhist lens and
Right.
also through the lens of their officials. Usually they find the best officials and send to China to learn. Some of them are actually, if as long as they pass the examination, anyone can become official in China.
Oh, okay.
So after spending a few years working as an official in China, when they go back to Japan, they will be greeted with like lots of rewards because they have gained a lot of like work knowledge and everything like that. The thing is, since they are already working for the emperor, the biggest thing about like Confucianism in China is that the people had the right to overthrow an evil government. It
Yes.
justifies a dynastic change. But in Japan,
Yeah.
they wiped that out. Yeah, because until now, Japan still had the same emperor from the same dynastic line.
Right.
And
Yeah.
because they are trying to make sure that the people don't get any ideas from that, and
Yeah.
also yeah, a lot of the ideas are seen through Buddhist lens, and Buddhist schools are teaching them in Buddhist temples. All
Right.
these educations are provided Buddhist temples, so they are not challenging the Buddhist religion
Yeah.
or
And I
their
guess,
philosophy.
yeah, and the philosophy. Well, and I guess I don't know if Shintoism has a role there too, because state Shintoism in the Japanese Empire, I don't know about during the Imjin War period, but I know during World War II and up until the end of World War II, the emperor was kind of a divine figure and everything. So you don't want this if Shintoism had that belief back then in the 16th century, you don't want this idea of, well, the emperor's a bad person, he has no right to rule, let's overthrow him. But in Japan, you don't want to overthrow a divine figure. I'm not sure if that belief was around back then or maybe a little bit later, closer to World War II.
Yeah, it should have existed back then
Oh,
because
okay.
what happened all before World War II, there is a movement called Kokugaku, with a national study. It
Okay.
is based on it is a reworking of Neo-Confucianism. Neo-Confucianism has also entered Japan around the time Neo-Confucianism became relatively popular in China. But the
Okay.
thing is, it was still brought in by the Buddhists, so it's a bit of like a side philosophy that they're not really important until the Edo period, until
Oh,
after the Warring States period,
yeah.
because during the Warring States, everybody was too busy fighting to study philosophy,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so what happened during Edo period? The emperor was, you know, pretty much under the control of the Tokugawa shogunate,
Yes.
and uh, as a shogun, he wants to create his own base of control, his authority, his own moral authority. So he uses Neo-Confucianism as his base, and he imported, even though it Japan was considered to be closed in Western terms,
Yeah.
they still have open channels for trade, with surrounding countries, with Korea, China, and so on,
Yeah.
and with the Dutch too. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
the thing is, yeah, the thing is that they bring in a lot of like Neo-Confucian texts, and they are learning from it because they think it's useful. If they can justify if Tokugawa can justify his rule by moral, and by through the Confucian sort of like stepped relationship, how a subject needs to listen to their daimyo first before
Yeah.
the emperor, that would be very beneficial for them.
Right.
But there is also a separate movement there. After a while, seeing the Ming Dynasty fall and taken over by the Qing Dynasty, the Manchu people, the glamour of like China fell by a lot. So
Yes.
they are starting their own national study. They are looking at all these Confucian morals, and they realize these are foreign sages. I think we should focus on our own national heroes and national legendary figures, and we should learn our morals from them.
Oh,
So
wow.
through Neo-Confucianism, they started to take similar ideas and to apply it to their own national ethos. So that's how
Local
it was
Japanese one.
created.
Local
That's right.
Japanese
Yeah,
one. Oh, wow.
that's
Well,
right. Yeah.
so because like I've never been to Japan and everything, but I wouldn't necessarily classify it as a quote unquote Ruist or Confucian society. So I guess that's where that transformation could have occurred then.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
But back then, they were actually very well versed in all the Confucian texts, and
Hmm.
even because they had all these different schools, and and after the Sengoku period, when they had a massive revolt by the Ikoiki monks
Hmm.
and so on, they
Hmm.
have suppressed a lot of them. They have pretty much made almost like an accord with the Buddhists.
Hmm.
So the Buddhists are pretty much in control of the Japanese daily life.
Hmm.
Post office are all these Buddhist temples become post office and also schools and also registry and
Wow.
so on. For example, in Japan, they would know that Buddhist temples are for the dead. So because they would have to keep track of all the dead people and so on. And
Wow.
even a lot of relatively secular or non-religious people in Japan would still go to the Buddhist temple to have furniture, have the funeral rites of their parents taken care of, and so on.
Hmm.
They're pretty much become clerks,
Ah,
almost the empire's clerk
yeah.
for Japan during the Edo period.
Wow. So it kind of becomes this system where the Buddhist infrastructure, if you will, or the
Mm.
Buddhist temples and everything, they become the bureaucracy almost, while Shintoism is the kind of state religion, if you will.
Yep, something like
Yeah.
that. Something
Oh,
like that. Yeah.
wow. Wow, that's fascinating. And just going back to Neo Confucianism again, I
Mm.
you said that it has to replace Buddhism in Korea. So, and I
Mm.
understand that Neo Ruism or Songmin.
Mm.
Sorry if my pronunciation was wrong.
That's fine.
His
That's
form
fine.
of Ruism. It described the beginning of the world in kind of metaphysical terms. So is that was a way to help Neo-Ruism replace Buddhism in Korea?
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh,
Usually,
okay.
Confucians aren't really concerned with how the
Right.
world started,
Mm-hmm.
or how it ends. What happens after death.
Yeah.
If you can't manage your life, if you can't manage yourself when you're alive, how are you supposed to worry about death? So
Very interesting.
that would be that would be that would be the role of Buddhists and Taoists.
Okay. They're the ones concerned with Confucianism has a little bit of spiritual things, but Taoism and Buddhism is really the one that is concerned about what's your eternal destiny? Are you reaching enlightenment? Are you following the way? While Confucianism is like life here on earth, live by that, the country and your own life will be in order on the
That's
earth.
right.
Okay. Oh,
That's
very
right.
good.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked a little bit about Confucianism or Ruism applied in Korea, China, and even Japan, what about some of its modern applications? Would you say that some modern Asian governments apply Confucianism today?
Uh, well, that's the difficult bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
The thing is that, to define what is Confucianism really, it's almost like asking people, are you living, you're standing in air right now because,
Very nice.
yeah, because what happens to them is, what happens to a lot of these Confucian ideals is a lot of them has already existed as tradition in
Hmm.
China, and
Hmm.
a lot of them are being practiced without people realizing that's a Confucian ritual
Yeah.
or Confucian rite.
Hmm.
When they are like burning incense to pray to their ancestor, they may think that it is a Buddhist or it is a Taoist ritual,
Hmm.
or they don't consider it as Confucian ritual.
Oh.
Uh, Confucianism just becomes melded as tradition to them. So
Interesting.
they practice all this Confucian rituals or even this Confucian ethics
Hmm.
without even realizing it. It's
Yeah.
to them, it's just tradition. It's very much like how even though some Christians have become non-believers, they are still practicing some Christian ethics.
Yeah.
They have become like culturally Christian. So a lot
Hmm.
of like people in Asia, they are pretty much culturally Confucian,
Yeah.
even though they don't specifically consider it as a Confucian act.
Yeah. And I guess, well, nowadays the People's Republic of China is officially an communist atheist state as well. But culturally, people will still apply what they've learned through tradition. Maybe, like you said, not realizing it's a Confucian tradition.
Yep.
Yeah. So, if not in modern politics, what about social norms? Like, there's respect for elders. Do you see Confucianism in that belief of respecting elders and being in a acting in a harmonious way with others in society? Would you say that's a Ruist ethic being applied in everyday life?
Yep, that's right. It is. It's become a part of local culture, local tradition, but it also has to do with how they are used to run their society. Pretty much,
Right.
it's like there usually Asian parents would like invest a lot in their children's education and so
Mm-hmm.
on. It's
Mm-hmm.
I think it has a lot of like. It's pretty much a leftover of all this like imperial education and everything
Yes.
in their perception. Their people's path to success is through education,
Mm-hmm.
and
Definitely.
also a lot of these habits came through all this Confucian ideas from the past
Yeah.
that has become baked in. And for example, even in like Chinese Marxism, I think they are focusing a lot more on the rural peasantry, which
Yes.
is very much based on the uh, Confucian idea that of the four occupations, right?
Mm-hmm.
First is the intellectual, and then the farmers, followed by the craftsmen, and then the merchants. Merchants last.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's and the thing is, if the even during the Cultural Revolution, when the literati is cut off, you have the farmers.
Yes.
The farmers are very much championed, and they are considered as the proletariat and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has a lot of uh, cultural background too that makes the idea a lot more palatable
Right.
to the local people.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm not an expert on all this communist history, but
Yeah.
this is the first thing that comes to mind.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that reminds me of what some of the like. I find the differences between major branches of communism a fascinating thing. You know, communism is not this monolith where it's just one idea. I understand it in Maoism. The like you said, the proletariat was the peasantry, while Leninism kind of focused on industry, the industrialists, the industrial workers. About Ruism being applied in diaspora communities, like in Asian American communities, do you see Confucianism or Ruism being applied like outside of China, outside of Korea, like in any special way or anything?
They may not consciously apply Ruism, but a
Yeah.
lot of their Chinese tradition
Hmm.
is based on Confucian culture.
Yeah.
It's almost like they don't know they are practicing a Ruist philosophy
Right.
because it's really baked into their tradition, and also their literature and their culture and so on. Their poems by a lot of the poems are written by scholar officials and all that sort of stuff. It's become so baked into every facet of their culture. They are practicing a form of Confucianism even without realizing it.
Yeah, yeah. So same as in China, essentially.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But the
Okay.
thing is, in China, they may have a different view of Confucianism because they have a bit of hate-love relationship with Confucianism because they consider Confucius to be a symbol of feudalism and backward thinking
Yeah.
during the Cultural Revolution. But actually, it happened way before that.
Yeah.
After the fall of the Qing dynasty, even a lot of the Republican Chinese and a lot of intellectuals during that era has already lambasted and blamed Confucianism for their backwardness.
Wow.
But
Wow.
nowadays, yeah, they are finding new place for Confucianism. They are still trying to figure him out, I guess.
It's a difficult problem. Much of the culture is based on Confucianism, or at least is very influential on the culture. But there's still these other beliefs, like you say, keeping us back, or reinforcing feudalism and things like that. So it's not a simple yes or no question.
Yes, and it's actually he's being boosted by the government in the last since the last decade at least, or maybe last 2 decades.
Okay.
He's back on TV, he's back on on school education and everything, but I'm not sure if they are still going to push Confucian tradition into school as a valid ideology that they're going to continue on.
Right.
I think, in my opinion, they are still trying to figure out how to fit him along with Marxist tradition because right now they are through my casual observation, they are trying to push this Marxism or communism with Chinese characteristic.
Oh yeah.
But what is Chinese characteristic? How much of it is going to be Confucianism, or it's how they're going to redefine their tradition through Confucianism, or they're just going to call it Chinese tradition without mentioning Confucianism too much.
Yeah, yeah. It's a tricky thing when you want to define a culture.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what are some good introductory texts for those interested in Ruism itself or its history? You mentioned the classics and the analects. What would be kind of a Confucianism or Ruism 101 you could recommend to viewers of your YouTube channel or listeners? What or for beginners? What would you recommend?
Uh, well, I'm not. Well, there's quite a few. I guess what would be. I think a good introduction would be. It's not specifically Confucianism, but that is a really good, concise history series on China from Yao to Mao. I think
Yao Tu
by
Mao.
Ken Hammond.
Okay.
Yeah, Yao from Yao and Sun.
Mm-hmm.
To Mao. So Ken Hammond's series on
Oh, Ken
5,000
Ham.
years of Chinese history is really good.
Oh, that's good.
Um, it's almost like a complete crash course on Chinese history, which is very long. But if you just pick on the Confucian-related topics or chapters over there, that's really helpful.
Oh, great. And of course, people can always go to Kuro History Bros for a nice summary and an introduction, of course.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so what, in your opinion, is the most important Confucian tenet or idea that's been applied in Confucian societies, or maybe can it be applied in everyday life?
Uh, well, I would say, I guess, nowadays, looking at all what's happening around news and social media, I would say rectification of name would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Rectification of names, which, when Confucius was asked, what is the Best Way to Rule by a duke from Wei. He said, the first thing he needs to do is to rectify names, pretty much to define things as they are. And,
Okay.
if you don't have correct information or correct definition for words or ideas, there will be miscommunications,
Right.
orders, or discussion cannot be held properly,
Yeah.
so nothing will come out of it.
That's very wise, actually. I always like trying to listen to the rule of even if you don't agree with something, try not to have a misconception about it. Be properly informed about that thing so you can talk about it properly and discuss it properly.
Yeah, that's a great one.
CJ, thank you so much for speaking with us, and it was really fun. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot, and it was an honor having you on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me, Christian,
Oh, you're
to your
very welcome.
podcast.
It was a pleasure. Yeah, sorry for the technical issues early on, but again, it was a pleasure to have you, and we'll keep in touch.
No worries. Yeah, thanks, Christian. See ya.
You see you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
And that's all, folks. Thank you very much for joining us about learning about Confucianism or Ruism. Definitely, once again, please check out CJ Leung's YouTube channel, Cool History Bros. Like I said before, it's a very fun and informative channel made by a talented YouTuber and historian. So you can definitely check it out and learn a lot about Asian history. And also, in addition to CJ, I would like to thank my lovely wife, Patricia, who helped me plan this podcast. Thanks to her. And next time, I hope to see you guys soon. I hope to get another guest on the show sometime soon, but I will keep working on the podcast as always. And as I always like to say, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye bye.